Live, Rotoworld, player news Q&A. Eric Samulski, James Schiano. We are back for yet another season. Last year, James and I were doing these on Tuesdays. We are doing them on Mondays now. Mondays at noon. Monday at noon. No, we will be doing them on Mondays. Sorry, like what day is today? We will be regularly doing these on Monday at 2 p.m. Today, we're going to kick it off on Wednesday, obviously with opening day being tomorrow. We wanted to get a head start on this and just kind of, answer any questions people might have heading into opening day. We're happy to answer just like general baseball questions. We can also talk about fantasy stuff. Some of your leagues have midweek waiver wires. So that will be today. You get some midweek waiver wire pickups. So yeah, we're going to answer all of that. James, we got baseball, baby. We got a full slate of games tomorrow, not starting until 3 p.m. because that's just the MLB, but we got a full slate of games tomorrow.
I mean, I can't believe it. It almost feels a little duller just simply because there was the opening day in Tokyo last week. And then the fact that the Major League Baseball found a way to start, I think almost the exact same time as the Sweet 16, I'm pretty sure, which is also very fun tomorrow, but I know a little early in Sweet 16. So we'll have that buffer. I'm so excited for this season. I can't wait for this to be back. I can't wait for the Mets. I can't wait for fantasy. Like, there's all just going to be a very fun, exciting year.
Yeah, I'm super stoked for it. Obviously, as we tweeted out here, the Rotoworld Player News Q&A, we've just renamed it a little bit, just as a reminder to you that we are still out here grinding the player news day in and day out. A lot of the insight we will give you in this Q&A comes from the player news stuff that we do. I've been tweeting out threads during spring training about things to kind of pay attention to. James just did one yesterday about things to pay attention to. A lot of that is, connected to, connected to like the stuff we have gleaned from the player news.
Yeah.
Feel free to ask questions on Twitch, on YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter as well if you want. James is at James_Schiano. I'm at Samuski NYC. We're gonna dive right in to our favorite. Dad is here. Hey, Dad. Thanks for the words of affirmation. It means a lot to us. We do appreciate it. But Dad had a question. What are your thoughts on Cam Smith for the Astros? Feeling good or apprehensive about the early call-up? This is obviously connected to Cam Smith being named the starting right fielder for the Houston Astros. James, what are your thoughts on Cam Smith to start this year?
I mean, the first thought is I can't believe that the Astros are going to be rolling out an outfield with Cam Smith and Jose Altuve. That's the first part to me where I'm just like, I can't really believe that this team, who's been the stalwart of baseball, I don't know, the baseball talent, acumen, success in the last couple of years, is doing something like that. As far as him, the player, I'm excited. A lot of times in fantasy, I will just shy away from rookies, especially ones that are not like the super mega elite rookies, like, the Bobby Witt, the Julio Rodriguez. But it's hard to deny what Smith did in spring training. I don't think if he was more or less the best player on the field this year in the Grapefruit League, he would have made this team. But again, I keep coming back to the fact that this is going to be a rookie learning a new position on the fly, one that's very different than the one he's ever played in his life. He moved from the infield to the outfield, third base to right field. I'm definitely excited. I'm excited for him. I have measured interest in him in fantasy baseball, but I'm really trying to temper my expectations and probably believe that we have something that's more like a 700 OPS guy here with 18 home runs.
Yeah, I think I'm excited enough that like I'm trying to get shares of him where I can. If we drafted earlier, if he went undrafted, obviously what he did in the spring is impressive. We know that obviously he was a high value prospect. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been the lead for the Kyle Tucker trade. We just didn't know it was going to happen so soon. But to the best of my research, played 2 games in the outfield in the Cape Cod League. He was not an outfielder at Florida State, but when he went to the Cape Cod League, they put him in the outfield because he's athletic. So yeah, adjusting to major league pitching is hard. Baseball Reference gives his quality of opponent a 6.8, which is basically like he was facing AAA pitching in the spring. So that's important to keep in mind. He's going to be facing regular MLB starters and relievers while also learning a new position on the fly. I would expect something similar to like what we got from Colton Cowser last year, where Colton Cowser had some stretches where he was on fire and you loved having him in your lineup. And then there were some stretches where he really struggled and you were thinking, are they going to remove him from the lineup? What are they going to do? I just think that's kind of where we're trending with a lot of these hitters is like, he's going to have a hot stretch. There's going to be a book on him. Pitchers are going to figure him out. And how is he going to adjust to that? And, I would love to see, I think the Astros are calling him up to let him work through that.
Yeah.
My question to you, James, and this is not something that, somebody asked us, but I think it's relevant. We also got news that Christian Campbell is making the Red Sox. They haven't officially said he's their starting second baseman, but it kind of feels like that's the way it's trending. If Campbell and Smith were both on your waiver wire, who would you be prioritizing?
I think Campbell is not even, honestly, to me, is probably not even close. The problem with Smith, and you mentioned the opponent quality that Baseball Reference tracks in spring training, which is a really good measure to kind of try and gauge expectations as to how well players are playing. Him facing AAA quality pitching in the spring is kind of impressive because he has never even really faced AA quality pitching in the minor leagues. So the fact that he was able to hit AAA pitching, they're probably like, okay, that's as if he took that step. Now let's bring him up there. Well, last year, Campbell just tore the upper minors to bits and shreds the entire season. And he's going to be playing his natural position, which is it's less of a stressor. And they're both going to be playing in hitter parks, but Campbell's going to be playing in a better hitter park in Fenway Park. And I think that Red Sox lineup at this point is better than the Astros lineup after the losses of Kyle Tucker and Alex Bregman. So I'm all in on Campbell. Seeing a guy like that dominate the upper minors, seeing him come from, they both came from the ACC, so that's kind of a wash right there. I think that Campbell is a year older than Smith. He was drafted 2 years ago, yeah. So I'm all in on Christian Campbell. He's the one where I just said how much I usually try to shy away from rookies. I think he's one of the ones that could be different and special, given what we saw in the upper minors.
Yeah, I agree. I would lean more towards Campbell, especially because depending on your format, there's added position eligibility there as well. DVS, just a note here, you said you sent a DM about a possible trade if you don't mind discussing here. I'm happy to discuss it. If you wouldn't mind typing the trade in, here, that way I can project it, or let me know where you DM'd from, because I don't see this particular name in my DMs anywhere, so I don't know which trade you are talking about. Anthony Bruno, I had to put him on here because he's got the Mets logo, James, and that gets you right up to the top of the questions. He asked Fitz or Rupp, that's Richard Fitz of the Red Sox, or Landon Rupp of the Giants, rest of season quality start league. I got to tell you, before I ask James to weigh in here, we got to push back on the rest of season before the season starts, right? We're not thinking rest of season right now. We're not, as Nick Pollock at Pitcher List says, and I like stealing this from him, you're not drafting a best ball team, right? You're not really picking up a guy right now thinking about what he's going to be in July or August, especially a guy that wasn't drafted in your league that you are, you're picking up on waivers right now. You're trying to see who could emerge with a really strong start to the season. Maybe they stick, maybe they don't. Maybe it's just a guy you get a good month out of and he then goes back to the minors and you pick up somebody else, whatever it is. We know, it's just who has the most upside right now is the guy that we are looking for. So in a quality start league for you, James, Fitz or Rupp?
I think the quality start thing is probably a null and void point. I'm not sure how many quality starts either of these guys are going to get. Richard Fitz, both being so young and just how difficult Fenway Park is to pitch in. Landon Rupp kind of being more of a funky guy. He's kind of a weird. I don't want to use this word, but he's kind of a weirdo on the mound where it's like he has a curveball that acts more like a sweeper because he's so sidearmy, and then it's like it's cutter, it's sinker, it's a lot of weird changeups, a lot of weird stuff. But looking at the early season schedules for both teams, that's something you have to do when you're picking up these pitchers and you kind of have trying to look for an edge. There is a stretch in middle of April from April 11th until April 21st where the Red Sox are playing the White Sox 7 times in 10 games. And just seeing something like that on a team schedule, that makes me want to prefer Richard Fitz, just because if you can get 1, possibly 2 starts, depending on how those 5 line up, and that's likely before Brian Bayo comes back, at least just before he comes back, or right as he's returning, which I think is something that could push Richard Fitz back out of the rotation to the minor leagues. I know it's a very big deal when pitchers make the opening day rotation, but when there's an obvious replacement like Bayo, who's clearly injured for a few weeks, I think that's kind of a telltale sign that Fitz might not be here permanently. that gives me a slight lean on Fitz if you can weather the first week here, because I have the Rangers, the Orioles, and then home for the Cardinals and Blue Jays, which at home are not very good series either. But then it's the seven games against the White Sox in 10 days. Where you look at the Giants, who again, we usually like the Giants because they have a very good home park. They open their season in Cincinnati, in Houston, home versus Seattle, home versus the Reds. So that's very good. But then at Yankees and at Phillies. So you have 5 of the first 7 series for the Giants that are terrifying, honestly, for a pitcher, and one that you probably don't want to get after when you're kind of usually focusing on Giants pitchers because of how good that home ballpark plays.
Yeah, listen, I will tell you, I just posted an article 30 minutes before we started recording about some trending starting pitchers in spring training and how much I believe in them. And Landon Rupp and Richard Fitz are both in that article. So if you want a lot more detailed, discussion plus some charts from spring training, just go to NBC Sports to check that out. I lean Fitz as well. Fitz is, throwing about close to 96 right now, like sitting. He has a true 6-pitch mix now. He also in his last start just showed off a kick change in addition to the curve and the cutter, fastball, sinker, harder. Well, the cutter is kind of like a gyro slider, but whatever. Differentiate from the sweeper. Like I really like what he's doing, and I think it's important. You mentioned Bayo, but remember that also Fitz is the 4th starter in the rotation right now because I think it's Sean Newcomb is going to win the 5th spot. Now, Bayo and Giolito are likely going to return at the end of April. But the Red Sox had mentioned potentially using a 6-man rotation anyway because you've got Garrett Crochet, you've got Walker Buehler, Tanner Houck, who has not looked good this spring at all, was coming off a massive innings jump last year. Then you've got Bayo and Giolito, who were slow at the start of spring. Giolito himself missed all of last year. So they were talking about a 6-man rotation to keep innings in check early in the season. So it's possible that Bayo and Giolito both come back. Newcomb goes to the bullpen or goes to the minors. And if Fitz is pitching well enough early in the season, the Red Sox just roll out a 6-man rotation.
Yeah.
And I understand that that's not great if you're in like a weekly lineup lock league because you're never getting a 2-start week from Fitz. But it just means there might be a little more runway here. If he's pitching well, then we might expect. And I like both of these guys, and I'm happy to add both of these guys. I think I would prefer Fitz though. Sean asks this question, which is in a 12-team category league, deciding between keeping. It's interesting that we're still doing keeper decisions right now.
It's the 11th hour here.
It's the 11th hour for sure. Keeping Junior Caminero or keeping Garrett Crochet in category type leagues. What do you value more? I have Crochet ranked higher than Caminero in any rankings that I do because I think he's maybe one of the top 3 or 4 pitchers in fantasy. But I prefer building my teams around hitters and trusting pitching to come later. It's hard to answer this question in a vacuum because I don't know like what other pitchers he'd be losing out on and what other pitchers he would have. But I guess what are your thoughts on the second part of this is, do you value hitting or pitching more in 5x5 category leagues?
I mean, what you said is definitely true. Like you want to value a hitter more, but in this exact would you rather, I think Crochet is he's significantly better, more valuable than Junior Caminero. Like Sean, you should ask yourself, if you guys put every single player in the pool right now into the redraft draft, who's getting drafted higher and by how much? And I think it would very clearly be Garrett Crochet, probably by something like 5 or 6 rounds. That's not saying that Caminero is not great and Caminero doesn't have tremendous potential, but this still might be the season before the season for Caminero. I think it could be the season that he breaks out and becomes a star player, but this definitely could be more of like an 18-homer, 730 OPS season for Junior Caminero. I don't think anyone would be surprised by that kind of an outcome. In general, it's hard to say do you value hitters or pitchers more in a category type league because one depends on the categories and depends on the depth of a roster. You're starting 9 starting pitchers, you're starting 6 starting pitchers, dailies, weekly. I think that in general, especially in a 12-team league, I just simply lean to the player with the most upside always.
Yeah. And I'm in on Caminero this year. I think 25 homers in that park is very much in
Super
play.
feasible.
But yeah, I see where you're coming from on this. DVS asks, where exactly on Baseball Reference can one find the quality of opponent? If you go to the Baseball Reference page, it has like the stats at the top, the spring training stats at the top. And if you're looking at all the spring training stats, right, like hits, strikeouts, walks, whatever, you keep going to the right, all the way on the end, it has an opponent quality number. And there's a little like, if you hover over it, it pops up and explains all of the numbers connected to like what is AA, what is AAA, etc.
Yes.
So it's towards the top of the page. And DVS is the one that I commented on before. I asked about the trade in the DMs that he sent me. So this is a league where he is, and I think this is really important coming after Caminero, because this is a Jackson Jobe question. He drafted a team that was light on saves. His only two relievers right now are Carlos Estevez and AJ Puck. And he wants to know if he should trade Jobe for Iglesias because he's lacking saves. I assume that means Raisel Iglesias, because I don't know what other Iglesias will help you with saves. And I think if you could trade Jackson Jobe and get Raisel Iglesias, I'm making that trade before the other manager has any question about whether that they should put that trade up or not. So Jobe in this league would only be a keeper for next year, and Iglesias can't be kept. So this isn't a dynasty league, and this isn't a keeper league where he can have Jobe for 4 or 5 years. This is Jobe for this season and next versus Raisel Iglesias. Just some of the other pitchers on his team: Sandy Alcantara, Hunter Brown, Max Meyer, Chris Sale, Gavin Williams, AJ Smith-Shawver, Christopher Sanchez, Spencer Strider. So he does not need starting pitching. And I got to tell you with Jackson Jobe, like, I know he looked better yesterday. I have some concerns that he doesn't really miss bats. His strikeout rates are not good. They're about 25% strikeout rate in the minor leagues, which is, I mean, to put it in context, Landon Rupp's strikeout rates in the minors are like 33% at every spot. So Landon Rupp is missing way more bats than Jackson Jobe in the minor leagues. Now, Jackson Jobe's raw stuff, we know how good it is, but maybe it's location, maybe it's pitch sequencing, whatever is going on, his raw stuff is not translating to swings and misses on a consistent basis at even the high levels of the minors. And so I don't know if that's going to immediately transition. And so if I could get an established closer like Raisel Iglesias for Jackson Jobe, I'm absolutely willing to do that, because I like Jackson Jobe. I don't think he's pulling a Paul Skeens this year.
No, I don't think so either. I also think that we might never see someone pull a Paul Skeens. It might be decades before we see someone pull a Paul Skeens again. I think that's something that's also coming into context with Roki Sasaki after his Tokyo debut. But it's weird with Jobe that even just strip, the fastball doesn't miss bats, because everything you see stuff-wise and velocity-wise, like, why doesn't fastball miss bats? I'm trying to rack my brain right now and think if there's another young starting pitcher whose strikeout rate spiked when they reached the major leagues rather than fell. And I kind of can't really place one in my head. Maybe it's hard to think one on the spot, but still, trading Jobe with a 1-year keeper on the back of him still makes me feel a little bit scared. I might try and call the owner with even like someone like Tanner Scott, who I like more than Raisel Iglesias this year. Maybe one more tier higher for a closer. But Iglesias he's rock solid. That Braves team is rock solid. You're definitely looking at 35 saves and solid ratios. It does make me feel dirty to accept that trade with the 1 year of Jobe on the back of it. The other owner probably thinks that he is getting away with highway robbery there, but in your context, DVS, with your pitchers and your league right now, that might be something they would be willing to take.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm heading into the season trying to win this year and not think about next year. And I could, maybe Smith-Shawver becomes a great keeper for next year. Maybe Gavin Williams does. Like, we don't know how those young pitchers are going to work out. We got a Twitch question. Already working on injury pickups. I feel you. I drafted an early league where it was a 15-team league, and I had Jared Jones and Yu Darvish, and then a final round pick on Yohan Moncada, and I don't know, somebody else. And I'm like, all right, I'm just replacing 4 guys on the first waiver wire run. But the question is a replacement for Tyler Stevenson. This guy already picked up Alejandro Kirk and is wondering if Logan O'Hoppe would be better. And I have seen some people that have been out on O'Hoppe this year because the contact rates last year were not particularly good. Even though the batting average is strong in spring, it's coming with a 39% strikeout rate and a 20% swinging strike rate. So we don't want to read too much into spring stats, but swinging strike rate, right? Just how much are we swinging and missing? tends to be something that is a little bit stickier, because it's not just like, hey, this guy's working on something, so he's swinging and missing a lot, right? Like you might see a guy trying to, pull more, and so he's hitting rollover ground balls because he's trying to get to the pull side, or somebody is trying to, he's fixing his stance, and so you see a lot more pop-ups. It's rare that you would see somebody working on something so he just swings and misses all the time,
Yeah.
especially somebody who has a history of swing and miss. um so I'm starting to have some concerns about Ohapi in ways that don't make me feel like he's a locked in must roster guy in 12-team leagues. Meanwhile, you've got Alejandro Kirk hitting 300 in spring training, doing what he has always done, which is basically posting the exact same walk rate and strikeout rate. He has always been an elite contact hitter. He's got a 6% swinging strike rate in his career, um, and everyday run with Danny Jansen gone. I also love, like, this kind of stands out to me, is Alejandro Kirk has a 51% pull rate in spring training. His career is under 35%. So if you see
Wow.
somebody whose pull rate in spring training is like 16, 17% higher than their career norms, it at least means they're working on that. Like that's intentional. Whether he can carry that over to the big leagues or not is another question. I don't know if that's going to sustain during the season, but you've got a guy who's like a 6-7% barrel rate guy who's trying to get to the pull side more and is an elite contact hitter and is going to hit in a decent lineup and play pretty much every day. I think honestly at this point I might just keep Kirk over Ohapi.
I agree with that. 'Cause I think there's a true would you rather there with Kirk. I also think you're talking about a good lesson to glean from spring training stats, which is don't take anything too seriously. But if it's not something that especially we see in the pitcher side, new pitch, picks mix change, things like of that nature, look for outliers. Look for tremendous outliers. Look for the fact that someone's strikeout rate is jumping like that. So their swing strike rate. I remember 2 years ago before the Cody Bellinger reemergence, his strikeout rate in the spring was like 7%. I know another catcher who might be probably not in your waiver wire, but Shea Langoliers. I think he's only struck out 2 times in 50 plate appearances this spring. Those insane outliers, that's something. And there is one thing, though, that if a player is working on it and working to get better at it, they might be swinging and missing more. In Ohapi's case, I think that's bat speed. I think we're very lucky right now in the fantasy space to have bat tracking and bat speed data on Baseball Savant. And so far this spring, Logan Ohapi's average bat speed is 72.5 miles an hour, where last season it was 70.5 miles an hour. That jump from 70.5 to 72.5 would take Ohapi from about the 25th percentile to around league average or just a shade below league average bat speed. So perhaps that is something that he's very focused on right now. With the increased speed, his swing has gotten longer. It's gone from 7.5 feet to 7.25 feet. So I think that might be the issue of where these added swings and misses are coming from. That also might not exactly be a good thing because he's someone who never exactly hit poorly. He's swinging harder. His swing has gotten longer. It seems like he's not catching up to pitches. This all might be bad, but just to give the counter argument again, I think that is something to be afraid of. But that's something that, it's something that's worthwhile to check out. And I probably still will prefer Kirk at the beginning of the year in a one catcher league. Just getting a catcher who you think is going to have a better 2 weeks is more important. But if you see the Hoppy hits 3 home runs off the bat and he's not swinging and missing at the same rate, maybe see where the bat speed winds up, whether it goes up, down, or stays where it was last year. Mm-hmm. It's something to keep an eye on. But again, spring training outliers are always very valuable to check out.
Yes, and I will just add a spring training outlier to that. Ceddanne Rafaela has just 4 strikeouts to 6 walks in his over 44 plate appearances in spring training. This is a guy who swung and missed a lot last year. He had last year in a full major league season, he had 15 walks and 151 strikeouts. He has 6 walks in 16 games and has said very bluntly that he spent a lot of time in the offseason working on plate discipline. He's got elite defense in center field. I think Rafaela is somebody that we are forgetting about too much. He's just 24 years old and was a top 40 prospect for in baseball last year. So that's an outlier that I think is interesting. Let's stick to the catcher thing for a second. Where did this question go? Cow Chad says, how much does Ivan Herrera's stolen base potential influence his value? I just wanted to point out Ivan Herrera started 17 games behind the plate in the spring. Pedro Pajes started 13. In the spring, it is very normal for teams to play off their catchers like that. But I also know that the Cardinals keep talking about Pajes. Like they keep talking about the fact that Pajes has value. They like what he can do. They like him as a defensive catcher. And so I like Ivan Herrera, and I think we all understand why we like Ivan Herrera as a hitter. But I'm worried that this isn't like a 80-20, 75-25 thing, but is more like a 60-40 type of thing. And also, Ivan Herrera stole 5 bases last year.
Half a season.
Half a season. But like in a full minor league season in 2023, he stole 11. So when you're talking about like Herrera's stolen base potential, you're talking about like maybe 8 steals, like 6, 7, 8 steals. That's like kind of what Connor Wong gives you. Yeah. So to me, that doesn't move the needle too much. Like me getting 7 steals from my catcher versus 2 steals from my catcher is not something that would make me heavily target somebody. So does it influence his value? Maybe a touch. But to me, I think Ivan Herrera's value is that he's a 9% barrel rate hitter who has sported, strong batting averages, has, in the minor leagues pulled the ball well, which, leads to that kind of authoritative contact. I wish I just knew that he was going to play more often.
Yeah, it'd be so dang Cardinals for them to finally give Ivan Herrera the keys and then once again take them away. Ivan Herrera played a full season of AAA baseball during Yadier Molina's last season with the Cardinals before they signed Wilson Contreras and has 3 full seasons of AAA baseball under his belt as a catcher. But I do think that they still probably don't really trust his defense. He hasn't really graded well there metrically. I think the big part about Ivan Herrera's value is that with a couple stolen bases, which I do think should be weighted more heavily the deeper your league is, because if you can find unicorns at their own positions, that kind of helps you gain small advantages in a rotisserie league over your league mates. It's similar to the Cody Bellinger first base situation, where if you're getting a first baseman with 20 stolen bases, you suddenly have more stolen bases at that position than every other team in your league. Herrera, it's a little bit more thin, but if you're getting, again, like you said, 8 to 10, the big difference though with Herrera is that I don't know how many catchers are going to project for as high as a batting average as Herrera. This seems like a comfortable 280 hitter and someone who last year to half season hit 300 with 800 OPS. That kind of consistent hard contact bat to ball ability that's rare from a catcher. So getting a 300 catcher with 10 steals, like that's someone that can really jump up and be one of the easily on the top 10 catchers in the league, especially if he gets to at least 17, 18 home runs, which I think is possible given his underlying power metrics. So check out the positional unicorns in all of your drafts, but also just be aware that don't overvalue what they are.
Yeah, and please just let this dude let him play.
Let him play. He's great. He's a great player. It's awesome.
Let's take a New York centric question. Brian asked,
good one.
In a 5x5 roto, Ben Rice, or Brett Beatty. I got to tell you, my stance on this changed yesterday. Because I love everything that Ben Rice is doing at the plate. I talked about Ben Rice in an article that I did, which again, you can find on NBC Sports, covering second-year players whose underlying stats suggested a better performance than they gave in their rookie season. And basically everything under the hood in what Ben Rice did last year says he should be a good offensive player in the major leagues. And if I knew he was going to get a full run of playing time, this would be easily Ben Rice. I would have drafted him in 100% of leagues. I just think that he is a really quality hitter. The Yankees ran in an opening day type of lineup yesterday against a right-handed pitcher. Ben Rice was not in the lineup because Trent Grisham was in center field and Aaron Judge was DHing. And I think the Yankees are going to do that often. I think that Ben Rice is going to start often enough against righties as a designated hitter. He's not going to play first unless they're giving Paul Goldschmidt a day off. I think Ben Rice will still play against some lefties because the Yankees are not going to use Trent Grisham against lefties. Trent Grisham has been terrible against lefties. But the injury to Giancarlo Stanton means that the Yankees can use the DH spot to rest Aaron Judge, make sure he stays healthy, rest Paul Goldschmidt sometimes, make sure he stays healthy. And I think on the days where they rest Judge, which I think it might be 1 or 2 games a week, if we're being honest, where they take Judge out of the field, put him at DH, let Trent Grisham play center field, and they have a really solid defensive outfield. I'm worried that Rice is a 4-game-a-week player, and I think Brett Beatty is in the lineup every day until Jeff McNeil gets back, and potentially beyond that if Beatty plays well.
I agree with you. I wish everything about Rice makes me really want to be in, especially the fact that it's kind of amazing. But he's hit the 6 hardest balls of his professional life so far this spring training in just a month. Everything tells me this guy's clicking on all cylinders. And the rest of the decisions the Yankees are making with this lineup, I think strange. Austin Wells leadoff, I think, is fun. He's a great on-base guy, but Austin Wells leadoff, like I don't really know. When you have Jazz Chisholm and Cody Bellinger, Paul Goldschmidt 4, considering who Paul Goldschmidt was last year, I can't. I think there's going to be a lot of motion and movement with this Yankees lineup, as there was last year there in Boone. He's kind of shown that he's willing to change things rather quickly if things are not working out. I think there's a chance of that. But also, I will push back on Beatty a bit. Again, you guys see the Mets poster behind me. Mets Sub Podcast. I cover the Mets 3 times a week on my own podcast and YouTube show. He's definitely not going to play against lefties. I don't even think he's going to be in the lineup on opening day. I think Luis Angel Acuna will get the nod against Framber Valdez because
lefties, sure.
Because of lefties. So I think that's going to be an important thing about Beatty. I think that I hate to use this word, but it's been so fragile with Brett Beatty over the last few years. He comes to spring training. I have a joke in the podcast where I call him Mr. March because he walks into Port St. Lucie and he tears the cover off the ball. He's gotten better every single year. This is the first year he's been the best player in spring training. But it's just once he gets into that season, he gets smacked in the mouth, and then things start to change a little bit. So I think they will be careful with him. Luis Angel Acuna is also a much better fielder than Beatty, and he's going to come in late in games. But I think at the same time, if Beatty's hitting at least enough, he's going to shift over third base and take over third base from Mark Vientos, who's a butcher out there. So you're going to get likely more plate appearances from Beatty at the start, but it's still going to be about a 2-week stretch where he has to prove what he can do because Acuna's there and he's ready. Vientos isn't moving off third, where I think Rice obviously will show that he's worthy of more at-bats, where Beatty, I think it's a mix. Yeah. Like, I think on June 1st, again, we're not thinking about June 1st right now. We're not asking rest of season questions. These are 2-week, 3-week questions, but if you had to ask me on June 1st who I think is getting more plate appearances, I would lean Ben Rice, and don't look at the Mets poster behind me. I'm not a hater. I'm not a hater at all. I love Brett Beatty.
Yeah, I listen, I could see that. And I think if Rice hits well enough, the Yankees may just decide they don't like Trent Grisham's defense that much, and they'll just keep Aaron Judge out there. But they do like Aaron Judge's health more than anything.
Yes.
And so that's probably going to be the driving force. But that is an interesting wrinkle as well. And I really like what Ben Rice is doing. So I'm happy to have him on my team. A young hitter who has not had as strong of a spring training is Evan Carter. And so the question here from CW is, what do we do with Evan Carter? Is he still a post-type sleeper, or is it time to temper the high expectations we had just a couple of years ago? Obviously, this is in relation to the news that Evan Carter is starting the season in AAA. I'm not giving up on Evan Carter. I mean, I think we need to keep in mind, I believe he's still 23 years old. I'm going to look that up. He's 22 years old. Okay. Wow. His debut was when he was 20. He's 22 years old still. The spring training numbers are not good for him this year, but again, spring training. I think this is more a matter of the Rangers saying, hey, your last year was totally effed up because of the back injury and struggled when he was out there. We need you to just clear your head and play. And they have a good fourth outfielder in Leody Taveras that was also having a pretty decent spring training. And Leody Taveras can man center field every day for the first month or so of the season before they decide what to do with Evan Carter. And, listen, Kevin Pillar is there now, and Kevin Pillar will play versus lefties. But that's not preventing Evan Carter from coming back up. I still like what Evan Carter's potential is as a player. I still like what Evan Carter can do. I think under the hood, he looked a little bit better last year than the surface level numbers suggest. I'm not writing off a 22-year-old. I'm actively buying him in dynasty leagues. And I'm not stashing him in a redraft league because I don't know when he's going to come back up. But I am monitoring him because I think Evan Carter, if he can remain healthy, will be a really good MLB player. Back injuries can be problematic. And so that's something we always have to say as a caveat is we don't know for sure if he is going to remain healthy. But I'm not giving up on Evan Carter as a player.
No, especially like it's easy to let expectations run rampant when you see like you said, a 20-year-old dominate playoff series the way Evan Carter did in 2023. Like be on the national stage and just take advantage of the opportunity. But that wasn't without warts. Like when he came up and he had that first cup of coffee, there was almost 33% strikeout rate. He made incredible contact basically every time he didn't strike out. But then you kind of realize afterwards, like, oh, he can't face lefties and he swings and misses a ton. So there's still way more downside than we like to believe in this hype. And also, you have to read the tea leaves a little bit the first couple weeks of the season to see what you can get from Evan Carter this year. Because during the spring, the Rangers said openly that they trusted him as a defensive center fielder, expected him to be in a platoon there with Leo Tavares. You kind of have to see you have to check AAA box scores. You have to see he's playing center field in AAA. You have to see how often the Rangers are willing to play Wyatt Langford in center field, depending on how badly they want to get, I don't know, Ezekiel Duran or Josh Smith in the lineup, or if they even trust those guys in the corner outfield. If they wind up ever trusting Jock Peters in the corner outfield, even though there's not another obvious hitter for them to call up and put in that lineup. It's kind of checking out all of the situations they're trying to see where Evan Carter fits, because there's still a very obvious Evan Carter fit on this team. And that obvious fit is in the strong side of the center field platoon, Leo Tavares. So if he goes down AAA, if he gets right, if he starts to hit, if Tavares is more splitting time with Pilar, if Langford's not playing center field, then yeah, I'm still leaving in Evan Carter this year. But if that stuff is not happening, it might wind up as another lost season for Carter unless it's a serious injury to that Ranger outfield.
Yeah. Let's talk about another young hitter. Dad asks, is Jacob, well, there's two questions here. We'll tackle the first one. Is Jacob Wilson a must add for a league that replaces home runs with total bases and average with on base percentage? I will say that like Jacob Wilson in an average league is still valuable because he has always sported a really high batting average. And to be fair, a lot of his on base percentage comes from his batting average. Like even in AAA last year, when he had a 450 on base percentage, he didn't even walk 8% of the time. It was that he hit 396, right? And that's kind of been him throughout spring training. Right now, he has one walk in 53 plate appearances. He is there to swing, and he makes an elite amount of contact. So I don't think Jacob Wilson gets a boost in on-base percentage leagues, but I think he is a strong batting average bet. Like it would not surprise me if he hit 280 or 290. The total bases versus home runs thing is interesting because he's not going to hit home runs, and so total bases does benefit him a little bit. But I'm falling short of saying a must add. I don't mind him as an ad, but I think he's going to hit near the bottom of that lineup to start the year, and so the counting stats won't be great. And there's also not a lot of speed. He stole 2 total bases in the minor leagues last year, so not a lot of speed, mediocre counting stats, potentially elite batting average, slight boost in total bases from home runs. Like, I don't know. It's not a must add to me.
One of the most fun parts about early in a season is what we can learn and how quickly we can learn it. And I think one of the most exciting things I want to learn early this season is how that Oakland ballpark, or the Sacramento ballpark, plays this season, whether it becomes a launching pad, whether it's difficult for people to pitch in the dry air, even though it's at sea level, how much the heat affects the bad balls there during the summer. Because Wilson, his profile is just, he has run such a gamut too of the way that the industry has kind of perceived his value this year. Because like, is he going to hit 2 home runs? Is he going to hit 10 home runs? Is he going to be 15 home runs? Is he going to be 1 stolen base? Is he going to be 10 stolen bases? Like, there's so many things he can do, and he's always kind of just hit everywhere he's got. Every year in college, he got better. Every year in the minors, he got better. Came up last year, he put the bat in the ball very consistently. Besides when he got hurt, he looks like a solid defensive shortstop, so he will be in that lineup. Hitting ninth is not going to help him early, but this A's offense has sneaky top 10 offense in the league potential. There's a lot of good hitters up and down.
I kind of like the A's offense.
I put out my bold predictions today. I think this team has outside chance to make the playoffs. And I think that line.
I wrote that in my Rotoworld ones. I said they're going to be in the playoff hunt until the middle of September. Like I think they will be within striking range of the postseason. I don't think they're going to be eliminated until like the middle of September.
Like up and down this lineup, the first 5 guys are all guys that could be like, I like that guy. Lawrence Butler, Rooker, JJ Bleday, I love right now. I think he's being tremendously underrated as we went through draft season. Shea Langeliers, I mentioned the fact that he has something like 2 strikeouts, 50 plate appearances. Tyler Soderstrom's, I know, a favorite of the Rotoworld staff. Like, there's just a lot of exciting players here. And then if a guy like Wilson can kind of just like catch the lightning in a bottle, if you can keep a 300 batting average early, he moves up to the top of the lineup. There's something. I don't love him. I'm not like drafting him everywhere. I'm not like I have to have Jacob Wilson, but this is
Sure.
a lineup I'm watching closely in the first 2 weeks to see how that ballpark plays, to see if we're getting the big second seasons from Butler and Rooker and how far they can kind of wind up carrying this club, because there's something in that water in Sacramento. I can't quite pick it out right now, but I see something there if I squint.
I will say that, Dad just has to follow up question in the chat of, would you rather have Cam Smith or Jacob Wilson for a bench spot? And to me, it's easily Cam Smith, especially for a bench spot. I want that upside. The second part of this question, I really do like Dustin May, and I think people should be adding Dustin May if he's on your waiver wires, because we're not going to get a full season out of him. But again, it is March, and we don't care about that. He's in the rotation now. He will be in the rotation for a while, and he's a pretty good pitcher in the Dodgers rotation. That being said, I do think a quality start league dings him a bit, because I don't expect much, if any, quality starts, because the Dodgers are really going to want to limit his innings given how few innings he's pitched, not just last year, but in general. This is a guy who has pitched over 50 innings in one MLB season. And that's just in his MLB innings. But I just mean, I don't think you're getting a lot of 7-inning starts out of Dustin May. I'd be shocked if you get many 6-inning starts. So there might be better options in a quality start league.
Yeah, the way the Dodgers are going to handle specifically Dustin May's roster spot this year is going to be fascinating, because clearly he's not ready for a starter's workload. He also has no minor league options. So the fact that they're going to kind of more or less drag him along this season in 3 to 5 inning stints, which I'm also assuming that's going to be what they do with Roki Sasaki. It's going to be a marvel to see how they wind up soaking up those innings the days those guys start. Like there's a chance that a guy like Landon Knack this year gets to 110 innings with 10 wins. I know that's not going to value in all of your guys' leagues, but in the right setting, in the right format, especially in best ball, I have Landon Knack, I think, on every single best ball team I have in like the 44th round, because he's going to just soak up these middle innings, come in the 4th, pitch to the 7th, get a win because they're the Dodgers, and wind up having maybe the second or third most innings on this entire team by the end of the season, which is something that they've done in years past. They haven't thrown a guy with a lot of innings, I think, since it was Julio Urias 2 years ago over 170, but last year Gavin Stone led them with 140. The year before it was Kershaw with 135. Like, they seem to be really going against the grain of not letting pitchers build up these massive workloads in season, more so than any other team.
Yeah. Landon Knack would have starting pitcher, relief pitcher eligibility too, which would be
also good in the right
nice.
league.
Which, yes, definitely really good in certain league formats. Another starting pitcher thing, DVS asked, end of rotation starting pitcher flyer. Do you guys like Osvaldo Bido, that is of the Athletics, or Matthew Boyd of the Cubs? To me, again, we go back to early season schedule, because I don't think either one of these guys I'm picking up to be on my team forever. So I'm just picking them up. And I don't think either one of them has like the Landon Rupp, Richard Fitz upside. So I'm going by schedule, and I'm going to lean Osvaldo Bido, because Matthew Boyd's projected first 3 starts are going to come against the Diamondbacks, the Padres, and the Dodgers. And Osvaldo Bido's first 3 starts are going to come at Seattle, which we love in that ballpark, and at Colorado, which we don't love, and then versus San Diego, and then against the White Sox. So 2 of Bido's first 4 starts I really like in terms of matchups. I don't really like any of Boyd's, and so I would be happy to like pick up Bido, play him against the Mariners. If he looks really good, sit him in the Coors start, play him against the White Sox, do that kind of dance until I find somebody I'm a little bit more confident in on my waiver wire.
Yeah, this whole first month for the Cubs is brutal. This is my first look at their schedule. Just the fact they had to open in Tokyo is a tall task. At Arizona, at the A's, but then Padres, Rangers, Dodgers, Padres, Diamondbacks, Dodgers, Phillies. That's April for the Cubs. That's ridiculous. They're some of the best teams in the National League, and they have to run through them immediately before they play one divisional game. When they have the Pirates at the end of the month, it's going to look like an oasis in the desert to play an actual team from the NL Central. But yeah, just based on that, I would even be fading guys like James and Tyon early in the season. Wait to pick them up on the waiver wire for those matchups with the Pirates and the Brewers and the Marlins and the White Sox in May and the Reds. Wow, what an easy May for the Cubs. What a twist and turn those fans are going to have to go through between April and May watching this team play baseball.
Yeah. We're going to switch to relief pitchers. We got about like 5-ish minutes left, guys. So, get some questions in. There's still a few in the queue that I'll get to, but feel free to ask. We'll try to go through these pretty quickly at the end. Couchad says, rank these save stashes: Mason Montgomery, Orion Kirkering, Craig Yoho, Camilo Doval, or Chad Green. So James, how would you rank them? Or does one of those guys stand out as like, got to get this guy?
I sadly don't think any of those guys stand out to me as got to get this guy. I can kind of like poke a hole in each one. I'll just go down the line. Like Mason Montgomery doesn't have as much. Same with Craig Yoho, but less so for Yoho. It's hard to picture guys that haven't really pitched many major league innings getting ninth inning chances on bullpens with other tremendously talented guys in front of them. Like Mason Montgomery's probably fourth in line for the Rays, probably third. Yoho third or fourth in line. Kirkering, as good as he is, the Phillies have never seemed to trust him in a ninth inning role through the years. They still have Strahm, they still have Alvarado, and now they have Jordan Romano. So I think he's also fourth there as well. And he just he's never developed a weapon to face left-handed pitch hitters. Like, I know the sweeper is sensational, but it's never going to be as good against the lefties as is the righties. Doval is the closest to the job, I think, but he also just every single time he seems to get it, he seems to lose it. And he's probably behind the pitcher that might be the best and safest in Ryan Walker. And then Chad Green just has the stuff's probably slightly above average, but it'd be very middling for a closer. And I think Yimi Garcia is ahead of him as well, also behind Jeff Hoffman. So sounded to me just for staves. I don't think any of these guys stand out. Maybe that's a boring answer, but I don't really see any of these guys picking up more than 5-ish saves as this year goes on.
Yeah, I think Kirkering is my favorite only because we have Romano with the shoulder injury and the, all the offseason issues where, like, if I'm save stashing, like, I know that Kirkering is going to pitch, and if Romano were to get hurt, I think it's Kirkering and Alvarado kind of like splitting saves in the back of that bullpen. I will just say my answer to this is if Scott Barlow is on your waiver wire, I'm picking him up. I know nobody is talking about Scott Barlow because everybody wants Graham Ashcraft to be the closer for the Reds. But Graham Ashcraft has never really missed bats, is not really having a good spring. And Scott Barlow has closed games before, and his velocity is starting to tick up again. Scott Barlow has always been a decent starting pitcher, relief pitcher. He's never really had a bad year. I mean, a 4.30 ERA is his worst season back in 2023. I think Barlow could close a decent amount of games at the beginning of the season. It would not surprise me if the Reds went with a righty-lefty committee of Barlow and Rogers, with Rogers getting the ninth inning when a lot of lefties are coming up, and Barlow getting the ninth inning when a lot of righties are coming up. And then they use Graham Ashcraft, earlier on in leverage situations. So I'm adding Barlow where I can. I think he's going to have a little bit of value. DVS wants to talk about Hunter Goodman. What do we think about him as a depth piece? I know that his at-bats could be limited for now, but catcher outfield eligibility is nice, and he's had a really good spring. I added Hunter Goodman in an OPS league. I like the catcher outfield eligibility is nice when you can play him at catcher when your other catcher is not playing, and you can try to, especially in daily moves leagues, where you can sneak that extra eligibility. In weekly lineup lock leagues, it's not as useful because he's still the backup catcher. And I got to say, like, I don't know how often he plays the outfield, because right now it looks like he's going to be the only other catcher on the roster. Like, he is the second catcher. They're only carrying 2 catchers. You can't have your backup catcher playing 4 games in the outfield during the week and catching 2 games. Like, his legs will be jelly by June. He's just not going to make it through a season. So I think you might be looking at a situation where Hunter Goodman is catching 2 days a week and playing the outfield 2 days a week or something like that. And your best bet is he hits well enough that they say, okay, we're just going to play you in the outfield. We'll call up Drew Romo to be the second catcher. We'll send somebody else down. But they've pretty much only been catching him in the spring, which is really, I don't love that, because it makes me think they really only think that he's a catcher. And then maybe your best bet is he wins the starting catching job over Jacob Stallings. but then he's catching 4 games a week and Stallings is catching 2. And so then you're kind of like not really getting the playing time boost either place. So I have him in some leagues. I'm happy to roster him right now because I think he's a good hitter and he's swinging it really well. I just think like really pay attention to that playing time in the first 2 weeks of the season, and I would not keep holding him if they seem to suggest that they really just see him as a backup catcher. I think you just got to move quickly.
Agreed. More of a speculative ad in dynasty leagues, and like most other Rockies, he's much more valuable in the daily league than a weekly league. So you can kind of manicure a lineup based on the in-course, out-of-course situation. But this is another situation where this is a spring outlier. You're seeing the swing strike rate drop like by 50% almost. You're seeing the strikeout rate fall by hundreds of percent. Like it's something that it seems like there's been a skill leap in Hunter Goodman, and also there's this little twinkle in the back of my mind that like maybe young Monfort, who's running I think pretty sure he's running the Rockies R&D department at this point. They could be figuring out a way to be significantly smarter than they ever have been as an organization. We've seen some breakouts for them in the last few years, and Goodman has every single tool. Again, like I'm jumping more on him in a dynasty league or a daily league, but as a depth piece, the last guy on your roster, give it 2 weeks, like. Sure, spring's been good enough. The tools are there. Playing time could be there. Stallings, Sneaky was sensational at the bat last year. I think he had about 800 OPS, which I literally can't believe. I'm not sure if he'd be able to believe that, but there's something. There's a twinkle here with Hunter Goodman.
And his Stallings' value right now is in his defense. I mean, he's still a really good defensive catcher, and that's going to keep you. That's like why Martin Maldonado keeps getting jobs. Like Stallings is going to catch a few games a week regardless. We're going to end with a layup question. Dad asked, do we foresee a rebound season out of Gavin Williams? Yeah, Dad. I've only written about him like 7 times this offseason. But yes, I am dangerously all in on Gavin Williams. I have him on basically all of my teams. I wrote, if you type in Eric Samulski, NBC Sports, you get all of my articles. You can see my interview with Gavin Williams from spring training. I talked to him about the mechanical changes they made, which have helped his fastball, both in terms of the shape and the velocity. It's helped him refine his slider. And then he specifically said to me that he was waiting to leave Arizona before mixing the cutter back in because he doesn't like the way the cutter moves in the air in Arizona. So I'm expecting the cutter to come back into play as well. That was a really good pitch for him last year. Gavin Williams tore up the minor leagues before getting a major league promotion. I think we're in for 150 innings of really strong production out of Gavin Williams this year. And so, yeah, I'm banking on a rebound. I'm fully in on Gavin Williams.
Yeah, likewise, all in. I mean, 6'6", 260-pound behemoth with first-round pedigree who throws 97 miles an hour with 7.5 feet extension. There's almost no reason not to be in a Gavin Williams. If everything else falls into play just a little bit, like you could be looking at someone who's even better than his teammate Tanner Bybee. That's very much in the range of possibilities for sure. Gavin Williams this year. He's tremendous.
Yes. That's going to do it for us today. As a reminder, we are going to be here on Mondays at 2 p.m. Starting the regular season. We're going to start on Monday. So we'll be here in less than a week. Again, bookmark it, man. Put a notification in your calendar. Make sure, your phone tells you it's about to start. Log in, put your questions in. Even if you can't make it live, the link goes up, the morning of. You can put a question in the queue and then watch it afterwards. And, we'll answer your question. You can get to that as well. So join us. Also, make sure you check out the Rotoworld Player News page. Again, that's what we're, calling this, the Rotoworld Player News Q&A, because a lot of our insight comes from the fact that we are constantly grinding all the info, putting it up on the Player News page. That's a great page to bookmark and just kind of refresh and revisit as this goes on. Good luck to everybody this season. James, enjoy your opening day, man. Enjoy it. Let's have some great baseball. And then maybe you and I should talk about going to that Mets home opener on Friday.
I will be there. Don't worry about that.
I put in for my credentials, so maybe I'll see you there. We'll see.
Nice.
Go Mets.
Mets.
We'll check all you guys out later. We'll see you on Monday.